Father's Lock with a rather unusual porch talk, and it happens to do with the distribution and receiving of COVID 19 vaccines. A number of people have expressed their concerns since it seems that a number of the vaccines were developed with the use of stem cells that were drawn from aborted fetuses. And so people are asking about the morality of taking these vaccines. Back in December of last year, there was a document that was put out by the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, and the document was called Note on the Morality of Using Some Anti-COVID Vaccines, and we have linked that here to this Porch Talk. You're talking about the difference between remote cooperation with evil and closer or more formal cooperation with evil. And the document gives you an example. If you're sitting around the table and a pharmaceutical company and the decision is being made on whether or not to use stem cells from aborted fetuses, and you're sitting at the table and you put your hand up and says, yes, I vote for that. All right, that's formal cooperation in evil. If you're sitting around the table and the decision comes up and you vote against it, but it happens anyway, the mitigation is somewhat lessened. I know of one particular parishioner from a previous assignment, for example, was engaged in a similar situation, and what she actually did was she said, if you agree with this and you go through with this decision, you will have my resignation and I'll leave the company. And that's exactly what she did. To some great hardship, as it were, because she didn't have a job necessarily, but there's where you're looking into some more close alignment with formal cooperation with evil. Here's another example that they give. If you are in a country where the vaccines are not readily available, or where the health authorities are not allowing citizens to choose, or if there is great difficulties in the distribution of the vaccines, then it is morally acceptable to receive these particular vaccines. In the United States, that is not the case. So here's where maybe some personal decisions need to come through. Can you determine whether or not the vaccine was developed with stem cells from aborted fetuses? J&J seems to be one of the cases that's being discussed. I have not personally researched that. I can't tell definitively at this time. But you could have the opportunity to ask and say, if this is this particular vaccine, you can choose not to get it. There's the question of whether or not you should receive a vaccine at all. And here you're looking at two goods. One of them is the fifth commandment, which relates to taking care of the temple of the Holy Spirit, your body. So there is an obligation to do that. And in that regards, the licit taking of pharmaceuticals is certainly falls within that realm. On the other hand, there is also the just as important good of the duty to pursue the common good. And so you have, in some cases, in this case, maybe some competing goods. But what I'm reading from this document is that this is so far away. You weren't at the decision table. You weren't in the manufacturing. The idea of formal cooperation is significantly lessened, and this is more of a remote cooperation. And in this regards, what I'm reading here is you can accept the vaccine if you choose to for health reasons under the fifth commandment with a clear conscience. If your conscience says, I don't want to take part in this particular vaccine by this particular company, that's good. That's to be commended morally. But the idea that vaccines in general are immoral, or that COVID vaccines in general are immoral, is not true. Here's the other thing that you need to keep in mind. You do not have permission if somebody goes and gets a J&J vaccine to say you are evil. What you're doing is bad. Do you know what that came from? That is between them, their conscience, and their God. You are not to be judge and advocate. If somebody comes to you and asks you about it, certainly now we have two believers that are looking at looking at the morals of this, and we can have a discussion. But that's far different than judging another person. So in general, yeah, taking vaccines under normal circumstances is a moral act. It is something that falls within the fifth commandment. In this particular case with COVID, we have a couple of different situations in terms of formal or more remote cooperation with evil. It is something that you pray about, you take to your God, and then you do what your conscience tells you to do, because you now have an informed conscience. If you have questions, give me a call. Be happy to talk to some parishioners already. I'd be happy to discuss this further. And thank you for your concern about this and being witnesses to the Church of Jesus Christ and to God's children.